In the summer of 1977, in the unassuming streets of Enfield, North London, an ordinary council house on Green Street became the unlikely stage for one of the most chilling and well-documented paranormal cases in history, the Enfield Poltergeist. The modest brick house, with its unremarkable exterior, seemed like just another home in the working-class neighborhood. A place where families worked hard, lived simply, and looked out for one another. But behind its doors, something unexplainable was about to unfold, forever marking it as a site of supernatural intrigue. The Hodgson family lived in this house, and like so many others in the area, they were just trying to get by. Peggy Hodgson, a resilient single mother, was raising her 4 children, 13-year-old Margaret, 11-year-old Janet, and her 2 younger sons, Johnny and Billy. Life wasn't easy for Peggy. Money was tight, and every day brought new challenges, but she did her best to provide a sense of normalcy and security for her children. The home, while small and humble, was their sanctuary. It was a place where the family could retreat from the struggles of the outside world, surrounded by their simple but cherished belongings and the comforting routines of daily life. That sense of safety began to erode one night in August when strange noises echoed through the house. It started with unexplained knocking sounds, soft at first, but growing louder and more insistent. Peggy dismissed it as perhaps the pipes or the house settling, but the noises persisted. Then, furniture began to move on its own. A heavy chest of drawers shifted across the room, seemingly without explanation. Peggy pushed it back into place, only to watch in disbelief as it moved again, as if propelled by an invisible force. At the center of the phenomena was Janet, a bright and curious 11-year-old. Janet and her siblings were the first to witness the unexplainable events, and as the disturbances grew more frequent, the once happy household was consumed by fear. Unseen hands seemed to toss toys and objects around the room. Loud, unrelenting bangs kept the family awake at night, and the unsettling sensation of being watched hung heavily in the air, making even the most mundane tasks feel menacing. The children were terrified, their sense of security shattered. They clung to one another for comfort, often refusing to sleep alone. Peggy, though deeply concerned, tried to keep a brave face for her children's sake. She called in neighbors to witness the events, hoping for validation that she wasn't imagining things. To her relief and horror, the neighbors experienced the strange occurrences as well. Chairs tipped over, marbles seemed to roll on their own, and the relentless knocking continued. While the support of friends and neighbors offered some solace, it also brought with it whispers of gossip and skepticism. For months, the family endured the terrifying activity. Janet, often the focal point of the haunting, became the subject of particular concern. Her once lively demeanor began to change, and she seemed to be under an unseen force's watchful eye. The Hodgsons sought help from anyone who would listen, including local authorities and eventually paranormal investigators. But as word of the haunting spread, it brought both believers and doubters. Skeptics dismissed the events as childish pranks or the overactive imagination of a stressed family. For Peggy and her children, however, the haunting was no illusion. It was a relentless, terrifying reality that disrupted every aspect of their lives. Their cozy little home, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a house of horrors. Each day brought new terror, leaving the family emotionally and physically drained. Friends and neighbors, while sympathetic, grew hesitant to visit. The Hodgsons became increasingly isolated, left to face the unknown forces that seemed determined to upend their lives. For the Hodgson family, the haunting was not a story to tell, but a nightmare to survive. And in the years to come, the events of that summer would remain etched in their memories and the annals of paranormal history as one of the most disturbing cases ever documented. The Hodgson family recorded as much of the activity as they could, documenting evidence that would eventually captivate a nation. Furniture slid across the floor without cause, doors slammed, and toys would fly through the air. Though the footage was raw and often unclear, it still provided chilling glimpses of something unseen, terrorizing the family. When the disturbances in the Hodgson household first escalated, Peggy Hodgson, overwhelmed and desperate, reached out to the police. Skeptical but obligated to investigate, officers arrived at 204 Green Street, expecting a standard domestic call. What they encountered that night, however, would shake their understanding of what they deemed possible and leave them questioning the nature of reality itself.
It came off the floor, or nearly a ½ inch, I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
In the summer of 1977, the Hodgson family's cries for help reached the ears of 2 dedicated paranormal investigators, Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair. Both men were respected members of the Society for Psychical Research, an organization devoted to exploring and documenting unexplained phenomena. Gross, an inventor turned paranormal investigator, and Playfair, a seasoned researcher and writer, approached the case with a blend of curiosity, skepticism, and professionalism. Their initial reaction was cautious. They were prepared to uncover rational explanations for the strange disturbances that had turned the Hodgson home into a place of fear. Yet, neither man could have anticipated just how deeply the events at 284 Green Street would challenge their beliefs and test the limits of their investigative expertise.
And we was all just standing in the kitchen, all of us together. And then all of a sudden a pool of water come from nowhere in the middle of the floor in the kitchen. And then we heard the toilet chain pull, and there was no one at all out in the toilet. We was all in the kitchen. And the door opened in the toilet, then the chain went, and as we walked out there, the toilet brush came from the thing what it was in, the container, and the brush just come up and settled on top of the toilet.
Maurice Gross was the first to respond to the Hodgson family's plea for assistance. Known for his compassionate nature and open mind, he was determined to approach the situation with empathy and objectivity. When he arrived at the modest council house on Green Street, Gross found a family teetering on the edge of despair. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother struggling to care for her 4 children, was visibly worn down by months of inexplicable phenomena. Her children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy, were equally exhausted, their once bright spirits dimmed by fear and sleepless nights. Gross listened patiently as Peggy recounted the eerie events that had plagued their home, the knocking sounds that seemed to come from nowhere, furniture moving on its own, and even the chilling sensation of an unseen presence watching their every move. Shortly after Gross began his investigation, he was joined by Guy Lyon Playfair, who quickly became an integral part of the case. Playfair, known for his meticulous research and protective attitude toward those affected by paranormal phenomena, immediately bonded with the Hodgson family. He was deeply moved by their plight, recognizing the toll that public skepticism and relentless media attention were taking on them. Over time, Playfair's involvement grew personal. He saw how isolated and vulnerable the family felt, trapped in a situation they couldn't escape or fully explain. He believed their claims were genuine and resolved to document their experiences as thoroughly as possible. The investigators set out to uncover the truth, examining every possible natural cause for the disturbances. Gross, with his background as an inventor, meticulously checked the house for structural issues. He inspected the plumbing, electrical wiring, and even the foundations, searching for anything that might explain the persistent noises or the movement of furniture.
Mum's laughing. Where is it? Oh! What's that?
The slipper was thrown across the room and hit
Oh,
the door
not my one.
as I was holding the door.
My one.
As Gross and Playfair spent more time in the house, they began to witness phenomena that defied rational explanation. Chairs slid across the floor, seemingly of their own accord. Curtains billowed as though caught in a strong wind, even though the windows were tightly shut. Objects, marbles, toys, and household items were hurled across rooms, sometimes with alarming force, as though thrown by an invisible hand. Both men were stunned by what they saw, yet they approached each event with caution, documenting everything in painstaking detail to maintain credibility. The most chilling aspect of the case began with Janet Hodgson, the 11-year-old who seemed to be at the center of the activity. One evening, as the investigators interviewed the family, a deep, guttural voice suddenly emerged from Janet. The voice was unlike anything the investigators had encountered before, sounding far older and rougher than Janet's own. Startled but intrigued, Gross and Playfair began questioning the voice, trying to determine its origin. When asked who it was, the voice replied with an unsettling simplicity, "I'm Bill. I used to live here, and I died in that chair."
You'll hear here the whistling first of all, and then the barking.
And here is this noise.
If you can whistle and bark and groan, then you can talk. And I asked it to actually say my name.
Unsolved. Well, just a minute. We'll try again. I want you to call out my name. My complete name. Morris Gross. See if you can do that. Morris.
Now that was the first time we heard the voice, and since then we've been hearing it again and again, and it's been getting louder and louder.
Very good. Let me hear you say my name again. Come on, let me hear you say my name.
This declaration sent shivers through the room. Gross and Playfair pressed the voice for more details, asking questions that a young girl like Janet would have no way of knowing. The voice responded with eerie precision, describing events and features of the house's past that were later corroborated by neighbors. They confirmed that an elderly man named Bill had indeed lived in the house and had passed away in a chair in the living room. The investigators, though cautious, were shaken by the accuracy of these claims. The most chilling aspect of the case revolved around Janet Hodgson, the 11-year-old girl who appeared to be at the center of the unexplained activity in the house. Strange events had already plagued the family for months, but things took a truly sinister turn one particular evening. It began as the investigators, Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, were seated in the Hodgson living room interviewing the family. They were keen to understand more about the bizarre happenings that had disrupted the household. The air in the room felt heavy, laden with an unnatural tension, as if something unseen was lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to reveal itself. Suddenly, the room was filled with a sound that froze everyone in place. From Janet's direction came a deep, guttural voice, completely unlike her usual tone. It was harsh, gravelly, and strangely mature, an eerie contrast to her youthful and innocent demeanor. The investigators exchanged startled glances, their initial disbelief quickly giving way to fascination. This voice was like nothing they had encountered before, and it seemed almost impossible that it was coming from an 11-year-old girl. Maurice Grossa, the more seasoned of the two, leaned forward, his voice steady but cautious as he addressed the chilling sound. "Who are you?" he asked, his words hanging in the thick, charged air. The voice answered without hesitation, the simplicity of its reply sending shivers down everyone's spine. "I'm Bill," it said, each word rasping like the creak of an old door. "I used to live here, and I died in that chair." The room fell into an uneasy silence as everyone's eyes instinctively darted toward the corner where a worn, empty armchair sat. Janet, seemingly entranced, remained motionless, her lips barely moving as the voice continued to speak through her. The investigators, torn between fear and curiosity, pressed further, desperate to make sense of what they were witnessing. They began questioning the entity that claimed to be Bill, probing for details about his life and death. But the more they asked, the more unsettling the responses became. Bill's voice carried a weight of bitterness, and his descriptions of his life were fragmented and haunting, painting a grim picture of loneliness and regret.
What about the voices? When did the voices start?
December the 12th.
December the 12th?
Yes.
And how did they start?
Well, One night Mr. Grove was talking about it about 8:30. He said, all we need now is the voices to talk. And that night...
Whether it would answer. Is anybody there? Think there's anyone there just now?
Yeah, I do.
Who's that?
What?
Who's that, Janet?
Pardon? Stuart Certain.
Stuart Certain, and he's one of the voices.
Yeah.
Why do you think he comes and speaks through you?
To annoy us. To annoy us.
Does he ever say anything nice?
Well... don't know really.
The incident marked a turning point in the investigation. It wasn't just about poltergeist activity anymore. It was about understanding the source of this voice and whether it truly belonged to a man named Bill or something far more sinister. For the Hodgson family, the thought of sharing their home with such a presence was terrifying. But for Gross and Playfair, it became the key to unraveling one of the most mysterious and chilling cases they had ever encountered.
Well, I think this is probably the best case this century. In fact, as far as documentation is concerned, it may be the best case of all time.
What special aspects make it so?
Well, the entity itself has been very, very violent at times, and of course the witnesses and documentation have been excellent. The violent things I've seen happen are the furniture moving, the furniture being thrown upside down. In fact, one night I was standing here, there were about 11 or 12 people in the room, and I was standing talking to one of the members of the family.
In their final report, both investigators agreed that the Enfield case defied conventional explanation. They believed the family had endured genuine paranormal activity, something beyond the realm of simple hoaxes or childhood imagination. For Gross, the voice of Bill and his chilling accounts of a past life in the house were enough to convince him that they had witnessed a haunting that science couldn't yet explain. Playfair, while initially skeptical, left the case with a profound sense of respect for the family's suffering and for the mysteries he had personally observed. The Hodgson family gradually returned to a quieter life, though they carried with them memories of those harrowing months. Janet would later reflect on the toll it took on her family, admitting that parts of the experience felt like a blur, but that the memories and the questions surrounding them had stayed with her forever.
So what was the first time something strange happened in this house?
Well, me and my brother, we were sitting down to bed one evening and we could hear this shuffling noise, and Mum coming because she could hear us shouting and screaming, and we said that the chest of drawers was moving towards the bedroom door. So she said, oh, don't be silly, but she see it move for herself. And then at one point she couldn't push it back, and then she got quite upset and said, right, everyone downstairs.
Well, you went to get a neighbour, didn't you?
That's right, yes.
Vic Nottingham was the neighbour, who was a builder.
That's right. She couldn't push it back, and then she got quite upset and said, right, everyone downstairs.
Well, you went to get a neighbour, didn't you?
That's right, yes.
Vic Nottingham was the neighbour, who was a builder.
The Enfield Poltergeist remains one of the most perplexing and chilling cases in paranormal history. Despite extensive documentation and first-hand accounts, it continues to blur the line between belief and skepticism, leaving open the possibility that there is more to our reality than we can see, hear, or comprehend. At the heart of the case was the Hodgson family, whose home became the epicenter of bizarre and often terrifying activity, into a documented phenomenon that still sparks debate decades later. Skeptics argued it was all an elaborate hoax, perhaps a manifestation of family dynamics, or even Janet's attempt at attention. Yet, many witnesses, including police officers, neighbors, and journalists, reported experiencing unexplainable occurrences that left them questioning their own senses. Whether the Enfield poltergeist was the work of a restless spirit, the family's collective trauma, or something even more enigmatic, its legacy endures. The case challenges the boundaries of what we accept as real and reminds us that some mysteries defy explanation. In the end, it stands as a haunting testament to the enduring power of the unexplained.